Amen. That was awesome. Thank you. Our next speaker, I'm not going to introduce her at all, really, just by her name, because I want her to tell you her story. And I can tell you it has been an absolute profound story, at least to me, and I know the other guys here at Veterans First. We are absolutely honored to have our next guest. I'd like to bring up Cheryl Bennett.
Thank you for coming, Cheryl.
Oh, thank you for being here. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Or do I need to use my mother's voice or my teacher's voice? Thank you. Because I'm not as good as the two guys before me. I have notes, so you just have to bear with me. It's the way I roll. The good news is Joe asked me to speak and not sing, so that's the good news. The not so good news is that this runs about 9 to 10 minutes, so if you feel the need for a hot dog right now, probably you could scoot over there and get one. But seriously, what a turnout. I didn't expect this. I expected some motorcycles and American flags and a great group of people, but wow, this is definitely a crowd, so glad to see you all. When Joe extended the invitation for me to speak today, my initial response was, wow, surely he'd called the wrong person. I'm just a mom, and not even a Gold Star mom. Plus, I've never served in the military, so what message could I bring to all of you, this organization of military veterans? As Joe and I talked, I mentioned that my son, Tyrone Snowden Wood, his American heritage began in 1609 when his maternal 12th great-grandfather sailed into Chesapeake Bay. In the centuries that followed, the family grew, and with it came a very, very strong devotion to country, a consequence of the new paradigm of liberty and independence that drove those brave souls to these shores. They joined the fight for their new homeland and set the example for generations to follow, from the Revolutionary War to the global war on terror to Benghazi. Tyrone's family served. My son's story is not unique, as many of you descend from generations of men and women who defended the principles on which our great country was founded. Our family legacy began in the 1770s with two ever-so great-grandfathers who joined the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War. Centuries later, their ever-so great-grandson would continue the legacy with his service and sacrifice in Benghazi, Libya. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Our family was part of the War of 1812 and the Civil War. As with many families, one great-grandfather fought for the blue and one fought for the gray. During World War II, my father, Tech Sergeant Eddie L. Croft, and his three brothers served in the European and Pacific theaters. And my father was also a member of the burgeoning, the new OSS headed by Wild Bill Donovan, which eventually became the CIA, as you probably all know, and was the organization my son was working for when he perished. Tyrone's great-uncle Howie, a seaman serving on the USS Gwen, went missing on July 13, 1943 during a battle in the Coral Sea. In 1945, the Navy finally confirmed to my grandparents that their little sailor boy was indeed dead. During the Vietnam War, Tyrone had two cousins, Major Bryson Wheeler and Corporal J.W. Kirkland, who proudly served in the Marine Corps. Bryson was a helicopter pilot, and after 20 years of service, returned home, but as with many, he brought the ghosts of Vietnam with him. Tyrone's paternal uncle, U.S. Naval Commander Ben R. Woods, enlisted in 1967, served 2 years with the Blue Angels, and retired 20 years later. In 2011, he died of brain cancer caused by Agent Orange, which the Navy initially denied. His widow had to turn to her congressman for help in order to receive the benefits to which she was entitled. Before my son enlisted in 1990, what little I knew about the military I'd learned from my father. But the stories he told were sanitized versions that omitted any combat horrors. My father, like other returning veterans, did not want to revisit any of the terrible events of the war. So his stories, which were mostly humorous anecdotes, and my dad was a very funny guy, were devoid of any of the dark places that he knew about. But on September 12th, 2012, that would change, and I would come to know about those dark places. My son, U.S. Navy SEAL Tyrone Snowden Woods, is best known as a hero of Benghazi, but he had other achievements. Some we know about, some we don't, and probably some we really don't want to know about. As he was growing up, what neither of us knew was that it would be his destiny to become a great warrior. The combination of his passion for adventure, his street smarts, and his risk-taking personality would set him on a path leading to a very elite group of fighting men. After he graduated from Oregon City High School in 1989, it was obvious that the siren call of adventure was non-existent in quiet Oregon City. At that point, I strongly advised him to enlist. Might even say I ordered him to enlist, which he did. In 1991, he received his trident, and during the next 20 years, he served on West Coast SEAL Teams 1, 3, and 5, spent 2 years with, I call them the Hollywood Boys, the Navy SEAL Leapfrog Team, and as a UDT basic instructor, he trained baby SEALs to become big, tough guy SEALs. During the 2006 surge in Al Anbar province, he led a platoon of 16 SEALs and 8 Iraqi scouts in a successful capture of 34 enemy insurgents and was awarded the Bronze Star for his extraordinary guidance, zealous initiative, and total dedication to duty. His intelligence, leadership abilities, and military acumen would advance him to an E8 grade senior chief petty officer by the time he retired. And he was also certified as a hospital corpsman, and believe it or not, he was a registered nurse, board certified in the state of California. After retirement in 2010, he signed on with the CIA to provide security for high-level diplomats. Because a transition from military to civilian life can be challenging and sometimes impossible, many Ranger SEALs and Special Ops vets turn to security and contracting work. As warriors, it's what they know and love, and they're good at it. That is what brought Tyrone to Benghazi for the second time in 2012. His story is told in the book 13 Hours and the movie by the same name. It is an unimaginable saga of the courage, intrepidity, devotion, and grit of my son's CIA security team that fought to save lives that night. Even though Tyrone was technically a civilian, he brought those 20 years of SEAL experience and an undaunted warrior mentality with him. Without revisiting the many interpretations and assessments surrounding the Battle of Benghazi, I will simply say that the one indisputable truth that I knew from the beginning was that nothing that I or anyone else did or said would ever change the outcome. My beloved son My beautiful boy was gone, and he was not coming back. As with the thousands who have served and perished while doing their jobs, as Tyrone would have said, the raw reality is that eventually the unacceptable has to be accepted. Those who volunteer, all you who volunteered and are willing to put their lives at risk for us, for me, you. And my son was no different. An important point that I do want to make here is that my son would not ever have wanted this to be only about him. This wasn't about Tyrone. He would want respect and dignity for all those who have sacrificed their lives for our nation, come back wounded mentally and physically, and he would never, never want his life to be valued above any other. For all the mothers who have lost their precious children through the violent acts of war, my heart aches for them as well. It hit home for me the first time someone who didn't know me, didn't know my son was part of Benghazi, asked me, "How many children do you have?" Wow. Suddenly, I was forced to use the past tense in speaking of my precious child, and that was very difficult. I take solace, though, knowing that my son was doing what he loved to do and that it was his choice. Duty called, and he continued to voluntarily serve even though his time with the CIA was as a civilian. Think about that. At no time, though, would he have wanted me to publicly whine or place blame, as that would be absolutely counter to his character as a man and his values as a SEAL. Early on, I chose to laud rather than lament and to take the high road in honoring him with the respect that he will always deserve. And time has proven that to have been the right choice. Tyrone's final act of bravery on this earth reflected the values he learned at home and on the wrestling mat as a state champion wrestler. The morning of September 12th, when he roared from that Benghazi rooftop, the bad guys heard his wrath and they felt the sting of his rage. Quitting was never an option for him, never. But by 5:15, he and his dear friend and brother-in-arms, Glenn Doherty, thought no more. Their tired warrior bodies lay quietly next to each other on that rooftop, their great hearts still. The enemy defeated, and their last great battle was over. 30 lives had been saved that night. There is no doubt that my son fully lived his warrior destiny, now a part of our nation's history as an American hero. Descending from ancestor patriots before him, confirming that the American spirit is eternally embedded in the generations that follow. Today, we are proud of 1.3 million Americans in our armed forces, men and women, who have carried on treasured traditions to protect the United States against all enemies. For non-military, our response, now would be me, our responsibility is to stay informed of current issues affecting our veterans. And it is our duty to fulfill the promise made by our government quote, "To care for those who shall have borne the battle and their families left behind." This promise should be honored by every generation. As with my son's actions in Benghazi, we need to do what is right, not what is easy. And supporting our veterans is the right thing to do. To that end, I want to call your attention to 4 nonprofits founded by 3 of the surviving members of Tyrone's CIA team. You may know TIG and Tonto and Oz, and they are very dear friends of mine. They have treated me like gold. I love them and I treasure their friendship. Beyond the Battlefield Foundation, started by John and Margaret Teagan. The 14th Hour Foundation, started by Chris Poranto. And the Shadow Warriors Project, started by Mark Geist. There is also the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation, started by his sister Katie and his roommate at the time that he perished, Sean Lake. You can find their websites online. These foundations do fantastic things for veterans. Okay. In closing, I want to say that I'm honored and humbled very much to be in your presence. I don't know your stories, but I'm sure that you're standing there thinking back, those of you who are Vietnam vets, those of you who served maybe Desert Storm, Global War on Terror. I don't know, are there any World War II vets here? On a motorcycle? Perhaps not, but I am humbled to be here in your presence. You have my deepest gratitude for your military service and your being part of the many generations of Americans who have fought and died for the principles, ideals, and ethos of our great republic. May future generations follow your example and continue to uphold the traditions of our forefathers and defend our beautiful country from those who seek to destroy it. May we always adhere to the vision that first brought our forefathers to this shore, Tyrone's 12th great-grandfather, Captain Thomas Davis. And may we commit ourselves to caring for those who have bravely protected us and the very, very precious principles on which our nation was founded. I conclude with powerful words from President Theodore Roosevelt. And some of you may be familiar with these words. I thought they were particularly appropriate for today. This is from a speech he gave in Paris, France in 1910 called "The Man in the Arena." It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never, never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Never quit, never forget, folks. Thank you so much. Thank you.
free thought for free people.